You are not alone. I'm Rico Nasol. I'm an executive, entrepreneur, and leadership coach. I'm an introvert. I was raised in an Asian household. I'm the youngest of three, and I struggle with imposter syndrome. You are not alone. Imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people actually struggle with, but it's often talked about in those dark corners in the offices, or not even talked about at all, as if it's something to be ashamed of. Truth is, imposter syndrome is a very real thing, and it can stop you from achieving your goals and feeling successful. 70% of people in the workforce actually deal with imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. In this video, I'm going to open up a bit about my struggles with imposter syndrome, but in the process, I'm going to give you 5 tips that you can use to hopefully work through imposter syndrome as well. I want you to remember this acronym as we go through these tips, and it's worth, because self-worth is usually why imposter syndrome creeps in. So remember the word worth. Welcome it, own it, it's real, trust your skills, and get help. The W is for welcoming it. Imposter syndrome, it is a real thing. If you've ever felt like a fraud, even though by all measures you are successful, you're not alone. You might be suffering from imposter syndrome, which is actually a psychological phenomenon that was first discovered in the 70s. Even without any evidence of being less than, often very successful people with imposter syndrome feel like they're inadequate and undeserving of any of their accomplishments. They're afraid of being exposed as frauds and are constantly worried about being found out. If this sounds familiar, don't worry, you're not crazy. Imposter syndrome is a real thing, and it's actually quite common. When you find yourself doubting your abilities, just remember that you're not alone in this struggle. You're just suffering from a normal psychological phenomenon. The O is for owning it, and understanding that imposter syndrome comes from self-doubt and insecurity. So why do I often feel like imposters? It's because of that self-doubt and insecurity in ourselves. We doubt our abilities and question whether we deserve the success and accolades that are given to us. In my life, I've often led to downplaying some of my accomplishments, and you may have done this too, where you've found some success or you've achieved some big things, but you downplay them because you feel like you're not talented or smart enough, like you're actually an imposter, or maybe you got lucky. It's like we were pretending we were something we're not when we did these things. So one way that I work through it, and you can work through it, is to own it and recognize that self-doubt is normal. Being insecure is a normal human emotion. But we can learn to reframe our thoughts and focus on our strengths and understand that those successes and those accomplishments are truly our own. We can build up our confidence by self-talk, setting realistic goals. Sounds cheesy, but self-affirmations, telling yourself and really acknowledging that you are good enough. With time and effort, you'll learn to recognize it, and you'll often learn to own imposter syndrome and be able to help yourself work through it and perhaps others. The R is for real. Like I talked about earlier, it is for real. Everyone feels like an imposter at some point in time. Remember that 70% we talked about? We've all been there. I know I've been there, leading 500-person meetings, heart racing, suddenly realizing that, I may not know what I'm doing. But usually when it gets going, I get into a flow and I work through it. But that fear, that insecurity is real. My palms start to sweat, my heart races. I start to feel like an imposter. I'm like, wow, I actually lead a team this big. They actually look up to me. And I have to remember that it's common. Like, many people in the world deal with imposter syndrome. Even leaders that I look up to deal with imposter syndrome. So the way I use it is, even though it's a negative feeling, I use it to push myself harder and be more prepared and do all the prep and then research and all the things I need to know that I feel confident going into whatever it is, the meeting, the presentation, interview, etc. It can also help us empathize with others. So knowing that it's real and seeing others around you, potentially people that report to you, struggle with imposter syndrome, it allows you to connect with them and help them work through their struggles while you also work on your own. The T is for trusting your skills. Your accomplishments are real, no matter how you feel about them, whether you believe it or not. And this may be a humble brag or not, but I've created some amazing product experiences, whether you're talking about video descriptions at Zappos or you're talking about trailers or whatever at Netflix. I've done some things that change industries and built teams, but I still have feelings that I wasn't good enough, or maybe that I got lucky. It's taken me time to actually own those things and trust that I wasn't just lucky 5-6 times in a row. Lucky happens by coincidence. 5-6 times in a row starts to speak to skill. And for you, I'm sure you've done amazing things in your career that you should be really proud of, no matter how small they might have been. And you should be proud of those things. You should own those things and acknowledge yourself for accomplishing them. You should be proud of everything you do in life, whether it's catching a fish, getting a new job, or just even sometimes making it through a day. Your accomplishments are real and they matter. You might be surprised by how many people around you are impressed with your work and actually feel like you are successful and they feel less than to you, but they're not going to say that to you, because they have imposter syndrome, so it's in their minds. And since they feel that like they're imposters, they may just be afraid to tell you how amazing you are. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise unless they explicitly tell you how you can get better. Just keep on being amazing, because you are. And the last letter H is for help. Talk to someone about your imposter syndrome. It often helps to share your feelings with others. In some cases, it might just be asking for feedback and getting a little bit of reassurance from your manager or peer or whoever that you need. And in today's world, if you're remote or not, it's sometimes hard to come by. When the camera turns off or when the meeting ends, we have no feedback. So the stories we tell ourselves are, that must have been terrible, or without someone saying that went well, we automatically go into that self-doubt and insecure space. Another thing you can do is talk to someone who may be able to offer up some helpful advice. Someone like a manager or your manager's manager who has dealt with imposter syndrome in the past. Remember that 70% number? Odds are your manager or your manager's manager has gone through this before. And perhaps you can reach out to them and ask them how they've dealt with it. If that doesn't work, there's also other resources. You can use your EAP, you can talk to friends, there's counselors, there's lots of folks you can talk about imposter syndrome. Sometimes just saying it out loud and talking through it can help you recognize it, do all the things on this list, and help you recognize it and work through it. Surprisingly, there's a lot of folks that are out there that have dealt with imposter syndrome. Just to name a few: Tom Hanks, David Bowie, Serena Williams, Maya Angelou, Tina Fey, Lady Gaga, Emma Watson. There's so many more people in the world that maybe you look up to, that I look up to, that deal with imposter syndrome every day. So remember how I started this? You are not alone. So remember, imposter syndrome, it's a very real thing, caused by self-doubt, insecurity. And don't be so hard on yourself. Everybody deals with it at some point in time. Remember, you're not alone. Your accomplishments are real, no matter how you feel about them, or even how others feel about them. If you need to talk to someone, please do. You can reach out to me, your manager's manager, peers, somebody. Talk through it, it'll help. Thanks for watching. Please share this if you found it useful, or if you think it can help someone else. And leave a comment below if this was helpful or not. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.